summer, you're not just connected to the Lions. With Vodafone, they're right here with you. Connected, united, unlimited.
Hello, I'm Gabby Logan and welcome to the third British and Irish Lions Vodafone Business Summit. Now, Vodafone have been the proud lead partner of the British and Irish Lions throughout this summer's tour of South Africa. And we want to extend a thank you to all of our UK and Ireland business customers for joining us today. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to discuss that epic and brutal test series in South Africa, where unfortunately the Springboks came out on top by the narrowest of margins. But looking beyond that, we're also going to be focusing on the strides that Vodafone have made over the last year in revolutionising the use of performance data and the Internet of Things, basically the technology that's used in sport. Joining our discussion today, we are very, very lucky to have three special guests. The two-time British and Irish Lion and Vodafone ambassador Maro Itoje, Alex Skelton, Director of the Sports Science Agency, and finally, Vodafone's UK Head of Innovation, Danny Kelly. Hello, guys. You all well? Maro, good?
I'm very well, thank you. Very happy to be here. Very happy to be amongst this esteemed panel of guests. So I'm looking forward to the event.
The pleasure is all ours. Danny, you're smiling away there. You've got plenty to say, I know. And we were just discussing before, I had a TED Talk at the weekend, so I'm glad you could squeeze us in.
Yeah, lots going on, Gabby, but I'm super excited about today because I think we're making IoT super cool finally. IoT's been around for a while, but Player.Connect, is absolutely what changes things and makes this a super cool game, right?
Absolutely. Alex, you'll endorse that, I'm sure.
I certainly will, yeah.
Okay, well, we are going to have a few themes. Let me talk you through them. We're going to have an introduction to the use of performance data in sport, how Vodafone are using the Internet of Things to enhance user experiences, and then we're going to introduce you all to Player.Connect, Vodafone's own data aggregation dashboard, which was developed and introduced in collaboration with the Lions this summer. Now, similarly to the first two Vodafone Business Summits, we're going to finish off with a Q&A where you all sent in excellent questions. We're going to be taking those by the usual method. You're going to put a hashtag Maro, a hashtag Alex, or a hashtag Danny to indicate who the question is for. And I'm going to put them to the guests at the end of the show in the final 10 minutes or so. So let's kick off by talking about the tour. Ultimately, the series went to the Springboks, but it was close, of course, and it brought back painful memories, didn't it? Mornstein's penalty of 2009. We're not going to linger on that for too long, Maro, but we want to talk generally about the series and your experience for an unusual, in fact, let's say unprecedented and probably never to be repeated Lions tour, the way things panned out. And you had a direct comparison as well. So how was the experience for you?
So representing the Lions is always an honour. It's always, a highlight of your career. It's always a really special moment in time. So, just being in the environment, being amongst the players, being amongst the staff was truly special and was an incredible honour. And, I actually wouldn't swap it for the world. All that being said, as you've briefly alluded to, there were a number of challenges, and as you can see in the VT that's being shown now, we played in empty stadiums, no fans. The atmosphere wasn't quite the same. COVID protocols meant that we couldn't bond with the South African people, the general public. We were very much isolated in that respect, and that is almost the antithesis to what a Lions tour is normally about. So it was a good experience, but it did present a number of challenges which made it quite tough. But that being said, it was still an honour to represent the Lions and be a part of that special club.
Of course. And I guess, in many ways, extra effort had to be made by management to make sure that you had stuff to do. You were able to bond in different ways, because in a normal tour, you just wander out the hotel and have a few moments to yourself. Well, that wasn't possible with the tightness of your bubble. So did you feel that a lot of effort was made to keep you guys busy, to keep you engaged, and also to help create that very special bond that the Lions come away with?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a lot of effort was made. I think the staff, the backroom staff, they made a lot of effort into put things on. We had like a little games room, which probably some boys indulged in a bit too much of betting and stuff like that. There were pool tables, there were quizzes, there were coffee mornings. We were fortunate enough to be on a golf course, and I don't really play golf, but people golf course where our hotel was in Hermanus for the majority of the time. So there were quite a few things for us to do. But no matter how nice the hotel is, if you're stuck there, it still brings it challenges. But no, a lot of effort was made to try and counteract the challenges that we faced.
I wonder, because you can compare your experience to 2017, how much the fans would have added to the performance on the pitch, actually, in terms of the motivation, feeding off the crowd. It is a very inexact science, isn't it? But when you compare to 2017.
Yeah, the fans really create the atmosphere. And I think you can see it, or we've seen it across all disciplines of sport, whether it's rugby, whether it's football, whether it's cricket. Like for now, the Premier League is back on. The fans are at all the stadiums are full, and you can feel the drama, you can feel the tension. And I think unfortunately, the Lions tour not having any fans, that element of theatre was missing. I know a lot of talk was made about the style / entertainment of the games being played in South Africa. But I think if there were fans there, it would have been a completely different game. The atmosphere would have felt different. The way, the fans ride the wave of the game, the highs, the lows, and it would have been, a great spectacle. And if I'm going to be, truly honest, I actually feel sorry for, because in rugby you can't really predict the future. You can't predict what's going to happen in 4 years, let alone 1 week. Really, it's hard to predict the future. But I actually feel sorry for those because for some players this is going to be their only experience of a Lions tour, and I actually feel sorry for them, whoever they are or whoever they will be, that this is their sole experience, because it's not really what Lions rugby is meant to be about.
And I'm sure those players realise that, because they're all internationalists anyway, so they know what it should feel like to have a roaring crowd. So, but listen, we were all roaring at home, and we were grateful that you were playing with such ferocity, and and that's been the amazing thing actually of rugby, international rugby in particular, behind closed doors, just how still the players go into battle with such ferociousness and such intensity without that crowd. So well done for the tour and for entertaining all of us. I'm going to move on to Alex for a moment. We're going to get into your specific role alongside Vodafone and the Lions in more detail. But of course, you were with the squad for some time, helping to set up Player.Connect with the coaching staff when they were prepping in Jersey. Without giving too much detail on Player.Connect for right now, how did you find that experience? I mean, that was quite a unique insight really for you.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I joined the team like the players and like most of the performance team at the airport, and flew with them to Jersey. And a couple of things really stood out to me straight away. First of all, the level of organization was incredible. They'd obviously been doing a huge amount of planning to make sure that everything was in place so that the experience of traveling during COVID and being on camp during COVID could feel as normal as possible. But also the entire setup was just incredibly friendly. And I suppose it has to be in order to on board so many people, many of whom have never worked together in such a short period of time. So in what I do, I'm pretty lucky that I get to work in elite sport quite a lot. But this was the first time I'd been part of a, what you might call an all-star team. And to see that all-star team come together in the first few weeks in Jersey was really impressive. Not only did the players sort of merge very quickly into a team on field, but also the performance staff, most of whom don't work together on a day-to-day basis. From the moment we landed in Jersey, they were, working as a team, making sure that everything was in place for the players, so that from the first training session onwards, everything was lined up. There was, protein shakes ready for them as soon as they finished the session, and the sessions were incredible. The intensity was so high. When they had contact sessions, the hits were massive. Watching the set plays and then seeing those put in to action against Japan in the 1880 Cup, that was pretty amazing. But I suppose actually, although it was great to see them in the 1880 Cup, probably the best rugby I have ever seen was the Lions playing against the Lions in Jersey. So it was a pretty amazing experience.
It sounds like it. And Danny, you were at least able to catch the Lions for the Vodafone 1880 Cup, 88 Cup at Murrayfield as well. That was your fan experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was super exciting, Gabby. I mean, it was exciting for loads of reasons, right? Because I think it was one of the first public events post the pandemic, certainly in Scotland anyway. So I think you could really feel the atmosphere in the stadium in the day. People were buzzing just being in a stadium again with people surrounding them. It was great. Obviously, it was a winning day on the field. So in the round, it was a great day. I mean, it was a winning day on the field. It wasn't necessarily a winning day in the stadium. They'd run out of beer at half time in Murrayfield, and you could hear a loud boo around the stadium when they announced that on the day. But, it all added to the atmosphere, I think, of being at a live event. Yeah, but it was super.
Yeah, it was. I mean, all those first, when things were creeping back, it was just amazing, wasn't it, to see people coming back. Now we're a few weeks, as Maro alluded to there, into the Premier League football season, and we're kind of getting used to seeing fans back, aren't we? Which is wonderful. Before we just move off the pitch, so to speak, Maro, the thing that always intrigues me about the Lions is how those kind of national rivalries are broken down, whether it is by design or accident, and you find unlikely friendships happening, right? So did anybody from any of the other nations surprise you as to somebody that you kind of gelled with?
I actually got on quite well with a few of the Scottish guys. Hamish Watson,
Hey!
Rory Sutherland, Finn. I got on with those guys quite well, and I've had brief interactions with them in the past, but it was nice to spend some time. What I found in rugby is that everyone's not that nice when you play against them, but when you get to know them, they tend to be decent people.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. Well, it wasn't always that way, was it? That Scots and the English blended so well on the Lions. There were quite a few of them this time, so maybe it was a numbers game. You kind of had to kind of mingle more with the Scots this time. But it's always, that part of it always intrigues me as well, the human psychology of how you kind of break down those rivalries and become a team, which you do, the Lions do every time. So we're going to move on now to the data and how it is used to improve performance, not just in sport, but in business. But of course, this is pertaining to sport. So starting with a very basic introduction to the concept, Alex. For anyone in the audience who are new to the concept, break down the technical buzzwords that we're going to use and give us a brief description of what we're talking about when we say performance data in sport.
So, performance data in sport's not a new thing. In fact, as long as sport's been around, we've been measuring stuff like distance and time and speed and all of those metrics. And long before we had wearables and IoT, people were recording, all of those metrics in training diaries, whether that was, how much weight they lifted in the gym or how much distance they ran, all of that sort of stuff. And then, but what all of that information was about external load. So how far you ran, how high you jumped, how many intervals you did, what weights you lifted, and then possibly a little bit of qualitative data like how you felt. But that was really it. And then in the late 70s, Polar introduced the first heart rate monitor. And that really opened up the world of performance data, because suddenly we could see inside the body and see what the physiological impact was, what the internal load was of all of that work. 20 years later, GPS was introduced, and since then, the amount of data, the accuracy of the data, and the availability of the data has just improved. So now the GPS devices are producing over 1,000 parameters. Some of them are not relevant for rugby, but a big percentage of them are. So you can very quickly start to analyze all of that data. Then heart rate, it used to be beats per minute. Now it's all about heart rate variability as a measure of, being able to tell a measure of fatigue, being able to, identify what the internal load is, how recovered someone is, how much fatigue they've been put under by a session. And, there are lots of other incredible wearables out there, everything from, instrumented mouth guards that measure head impacts to patches that you wear on your skin to measure the amount of sweat that you produce and the salinity of your sweat, so that you can tailor your electrolytes to replace them exactly. A lot of the players are wearing Whoop devices, so that's something that you wear all the time, and it measures your recovery, your heart rate variability, and you get an idea of how much sleep you've had, the recovery that you've achieved from your sleep. So there's a whole lot, but it's no longer just the realms of elite performance. So mostly we have access to this sort of data in our day-to-day lives. Our phones have, tracking. People who wear an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, they're getting heart rate information, all of that. So there's a huge amount of data out there, and getting into that and using that for performance is really where performance is going in elite sport.
And the kind of data that elite sports teams generally receive, is there a kind of top 10 metrics, or does it depend on obviously the different sports, the level of the sports? What are they expecting to receive?
So it does depend on the sport. If we're talking about rugby, the key metrics will be the distance that they travel, both total and at different speeds. So obviously the higher speed you're traveling, the higher physiological load that you're getting, the number of contacts that a player is exposed to, the internal load, so the aerobic and anaerobic load that they're exposed to, which you can get from heart rate monitors. And then there are a number of other metrics that are pretty not unique, but are special to rugby. So stuff like the amount of frequency of high-speed running. So that's really important, especially at this level. So all of those coming together with data about quality of sleep, recovery, all of that comes together to give a really holistic picture of an athlete.
Maro, can we bring you in on this to give us the player's perspective and an insight into how this impacts on your life and what you need to be mindful of to ensure that you get the best performance from your abilities, and how you look at this information, without, I suppose, becoming kind of overloaded with information?
Yeah, I think it's important to know specifically what you are trying to go after. So with the daily monitoring through the Player.Connect, you kind of, over time, and it doesn't take too long, but 3-4 days, you start to build a picture of things that are lacking, things that need to be improved, things that are consistent, or etc. So for example, for me, there was a period during the tour where I was consistently not sleeping too well. So that was then highlighted through the Player.Connect, through the daily monitoring. Then as a result of that, we started to put plans in place that would create a better sleeping environment for myself, which obviously has beneficial impacts on performance, etc. Another example was when my weight was dropping a little bit when we got to South Africa. And that again was highlighted through the Player.Connect, and it was linked to the going up to altitude. Sometimes it affects the way your body consumes food, etc. So it meant that on top of the training, I need to eat a little bit more carbs to top up my, calorie intake. So there's little things like that it just identifies, helps create a better picture around, and then once you know what the problem is, you can then build solutions to hopefully solve it.
And are you somebody who wants to see that information yourself, or are you happy for somebody else to kind of guide you through it? Is it a kind of a two-way street with coaches and the support staff?
Well, I think it's very player dependent. I'm somebody who likes to see the information. I'm someone who likes to know exactly the reason why I'm doing something, and a little bit of the science behind it. Not too much, but a little bit of the science behind it. So I'm crystal clear with the reasons why this method or this advice is recommended.
Well, if you're talking science, let's bring Danny in, because before we go on to talk about Vodafone's Player.Connect, Alex touched upon the gap in the market that Vodafone had spotted using their IoT technology to aggregate data collected from various sources. Can you describe what Vodafone's IoT tech does more generally for the lay people of us in the audience?
Yes, a common challenge I'm often asked to address. The best way to think about it, Gabby, is lots of things connected to the internet these days. We all have them in our homes now. There's lots of internet around us. Our lights are, are connected, smart devices around the house. That's the same across the world at the minute, right? So just to put some numbers around it, there's, by 2025, there'll be just over 8 billion people on the planet. But at the same time, there'll be about 40 billion connected devices. So all of those things are already generating lots of data in some way that is probably very useful. What we've identified is it's no longer about a race to connect things to the internet. We're there already. Actually, how do we capture all of that information? It's already been produced in those siloed technology stacks, gather it together and present that so it's usable. And really that's what we do best now, Gabby. So we're effectively, the best way to think about the technology we have, it's like the United Nations. We've got a platform that can talk the same language to all of these separate IT stacks or separate technology stacks. We collate all of that to get together, we produce it back up, and then allow you to take from that insights to take action against it, which is exactly what Alex just described in terms of there's lots of devices in player sport where we can capture data about players on and off pitch. And actually, if we can capture those, bring them together and present them back, just as Maro then pointed out, it's really about, okay, let me take action on that. My body weight was dropping, my sleep was challenged in some way. So the challenge that we face, whether it's a smart city, a smart building, a smart manufacturing plant, or a bunch of players on the field, it's about aggregating all of that data together, presenting it in a usable way in a single pane of glass. And we call it the United Nations in terms of a little bit of kit that does that for us.
Yeah, so it's you mentioned buildings as well, and not just non-elite sports people, but this way of accruing all this information can affect so many businesses as well, as well as our kind of individual health.
It's completely transferable, so if we can treat a person in the same way we can look at a city or a building, it's ultimately just about retrospectively integrating through legacy information stacks, pulling that information out. So on a player, it might be, a heart monitor, a Fitbit, or, a gum shield that's managing impact. But in a smart building, it could be from thermostats and heating and, security cameras. So it's just about aggregating that data and then collating it and presenting it back in some usable fashion. So exactly the same technology, but just applied in different ways in different circumstances.
Okay, well, with all that in mind, we're going to turn to Vodafone's Player.Connect, and this is a hugely exciting new product. It was first trialled with the Lions on the 2021 tour. We've got an intro video that we're going to show you first, which stars all three of our guests. Absolutely perfect. Before, Alex, I give you a chance to explain it in a bit more detail. Let's have a look.
The Vodafone Player.Connect is a first of its kind performance dashboard that uses Vodafone's IoT technology to aggregate the data from existing sports wearables and serving that back up in a single pane of glass. IoT is the Internet of Things. It allows us to capture data across people, places and things and collate that data and analyse that data and present that information back.
Player.Connect dashboard will give the coaching staff, the sports science team, all of the tools that they need to make sure that they're getting absolutely the best out of the athletes without the manual process of collecting data from multiple different sources and pulling it all together.
Well, that gives us a good introduction, Alex, but can you go into more detail for us about Player.Connect, how it enhances the effectiveness of performance data, and also what was happening before with that data, why it was a little bit more disparate and kind of not as easy perhaps to attain?
Yeah, sure. So that data, like we said, has been around for a while now, but traditionally what would happen is that the data would be analyzed within the software for each individual device. So whether it was a GPS device or heart rate, and then a sports scientist or a data analyst would have to manually transfer that data, combine it with the morning monitoring data from the athletes or any other data that they had about them. And that could take hours a day of someone's time. And if you think about the end of a session, you don't want to spend 2-3 hours waiting for that data in order to be able to react to it. What Player.Connect does is it aggregates that data in real or near real time. So you can get all of that data pulled into one place. The reports are generated automatically, and then they're available there for the sports science team and the coaches. So if they discover that, 5 of the players haven't achieved the physiological results that they wanted, they can just put them back out on the field because they've got that information straight away, which is maybe not always a good thing for the players who might fancy to rest, but the outcome is that they can react to that really quickly. So Player.Connect does all of that in real time, and it presents that information in a way that is usable by the coaches, the sports science team, and also the medics when required.
Where does the data come from?
So with the Lions use Catapult for GPS. So it's one of these things. So this is a Catapult Vector S7. It's a little thing that they wear in the back of their jerseys, just between the shoulder blades, just there, and that's recording, essentially movements. It's got an accelerometer in there, and then post session, it's delivering over 1,000 different parameters. It could be, the distance they traveled at less than 1 meter a second, or the distance that they travel when sprinting, the number of accelerations, of decelerations, the number of contacts that the players had. Then they also will wear a heart rate monitor like this one. So this is first beat, and that's sending the data to the sidelines. It's giving real-time heart rate. It's giving heart rate variability, measurements like aerobic and anaerobic load. And then some of the players will wear one of these. This is a Whoop device, which is they'd wear all the time to record their heart rate variability, their sleep, so quantity and quality of sleep, stuff like sleep latency, how long does it take them to get to sleep? And that's quite useful for working out what works best for you. So do you sleep best if you don't drink caffeine, have any coffee at all? Or do you recover slightly better if you have a cup of coffee at some point before midday? All of that sort of stuff, you can build up a picture for the athlete. And then last of all, it also is getting data from the morning monitoring system, which Maro mentioned earlier, where they put their data in every day. It looks at, how are they feeling? How stiff, how sore are they? They go through a few tests, they input their weights. And that means that someone can really quickly pick up, if a player like Maro isn't able to maintain their weight, then coach or sports scientist can have a bit of a chat with him and help him to put in place the right actions in order for that to, bring his weight back up or stop that from happening.
And Danny, why is Vodafone uniquely placed to develop a product like this?
There's a couple of reasons for it, Gabby. I mean, it comes down to our leadership, I suppose, in this space. We've been the world leader in IoT solutions for 7 years, according to Gartner. So we have that credential in the space. We've got about 118 million connections already live on the platform. So we're not starting from scratch when we looked at Player.Connect as an opportunity to develop something different in the world of sport. We of course have that Raptor technology, or what I called earlier the United Nations, our ability to aggregate those disparate siloed information stacks, and whether that's in sport or industry, but it doesn't really matter. It's the same principle that applies. So we've got a of capability that allows us to do that. And of course, the security. And security is a big feature here. Gabby, we've built our platform in a UK secure environment. It's completely UK sovereign, and we manage that to the same levels of top level security as we would do, for very sensitive accounts. And the reason that's pretty key, you think about what we're dealing with here. We're aggregating, capturing very sensitive data, sometimes in business, but actually in sports and in elite sports, it's very important that we can lock that up in a secure way. And we've got exactly that skill set. So it's really that leadership credentials, our Raptor technology that allows us to aggregate the data, and then security. When you bring all of that together, it's lined up for Vodafone to take a lead in delivering these solutions.
Yeah, I mean, not only do you not want people's personal information getting out, but obviously in sport as well, marginal gains. If somebody else could get hold of that information, I'm sure there'd be metrics there which could help the opposition.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure some of the betting organisations would have been loving to get their hands on that type of data, mid-game. So it's super important then that we look at, okay, how do we secure that information? So for the players, but actually when we think about how we take it forward and we're building smart cities of the future and aggregating data around our cities, and we're serving our city customers, it's important that when we do so in a secure fashion. So it's exactly the same principles.
Okay, well, let's have a look at another video. And this one depicts specific application of Player.Connect. And then I'm going to come back to you, Alex, for a question.
Player.Connect system is ingesting data from two different systems for collision. One is the mouthguard and the other is the GPS tracker that you're wearing. Okay, let's go and have a go with the first drill.
Let's do it.
Because we're aggregating data from lots of different sources, means that we can get a much more holistic view of how those impacts are affecting you as an individual.
So with this will be able to give us feedback from training as well as games as well?
Yeah, absolutely. How the coaching staff can use this data is they can see whether you need to increase the number of collisions, back off a little bit to make sure that you're in peak shape when it comes to the 3 tests against South Africa.
So, Alex, the product was trialled and developed over the summer with the Lions, and the video gave us a snapshot of one specific application. But can you talk us through how Player.Connect was adopted by the staff and the different teams, the different coaching teams within the setup, and give us an idea about the kind of information that each department was looking for? Because I imagine the medics, the strength and conditioning, they're all looking for different things.
Yeah, sure. So it was obviously designed to be used by the entirety of the performance team, but like you say, different people in the team are going to want different information. So if we start with the medics would mostly be looking at the sort of data that you get in morning monitoring. So stiffness and soreness were really key for them to make sure that they can quickly identify if anyone is, a little bit more stiff than normal and probably needs either some massage or some physio, whether they're more sore than normal, and as well as mood, quality of sleep. So depending on the level of that might have been covered by a sports scientist, it might have been covered by a medic in a conversation. Then the sports science and the S&C team, they would look at all of the data and they'd probably have the most holistic view of the training load and the recovery that the athletes were experiencing. So they'd see all of the distance data, the heart rate data, the contacts, all of that information, as well as all of the data from Whoop devices, from morning monitoring, so that they could get a really good picture. And, that would inform whether or not the players are experiencing the right sort of training load, the training load that is planned. And sometimes a session that is planned isn't as hard as they thought it might be. Sometimes it's harder than they thought it might be. Having that data means that they can then sort of customize the sessions to make sure that the load that they want is achieved. Then obviously the coaching staff, there's a set of reports for them. But in reality, mostly what happens is that the sports science team, the S&C team will be feeding back to the coaches the information that they need, whether that is, this player's not recovering as well as we wanted them to, or the group's especially tired, and that allows them to then tweak the training, either make it harder, make it easier, to make sure that the players are perfectly prepared when it comes to the tests.
And can you give us any kind of examples of data collected which led to decisions perhaps changing or at least being reaffirmed by the coaching staff?
Well, actually, Maro's actually given one already. So if he was struggling to sleep and his weight was not consistent, the actions that the coaching staff took with him to help him, it was likely one of the sports scientists would have had a chat with him. That's all going to have come from Player.Connect. So morning monitoring data, players put it in every morning. The sports science team is analyzing that, looking at that data in real time as it comes in, and then they're picking up with the individuals and saying, look, it looks like you didn't have a very good night's sleep. What can we do? Something going on, anything that we can help you with? And, optimizing their recovery and making sure that they're not overly sore. If they see that there's a high level of fatigue or a high level of soreness in the team, that might inform them to talk to the coaches and possibly change the training. But there's actually another example that's pretty good. So if you, Lions rugby, this absolute elite of rugby. And when you get to this level, the speed is really key to being able to get away, being able to chase someone down if necessary. So one of the metrics that they look for is how frequently a player is getting to 90% of their max speed. And so they'll look on a daily basis to see, if there are any players who are falling outside of 5 to 7 days, then they will pick those players and take them out and make sure that they are doing an extra session. So, it might make the day a little bit harder for that individual, but it means that when it comes to the test, that individual is in perfect condition to be able to cope with the demands of, a test against South Africa.
I don't suppose you were privy to any kind of decision making in terms of selection that the data might have contributed towards.
Yes, but I wouldn't be able to tell you about
that. Maro, you've talked about how it was something that you were kind of engaged with, but not, it wasn't kind of impeding your day so much. It wasn't like you were having to sit at a computer for hours and hours on end. Did you find it interesting, inputting and then receiving the data back?
I found it interesting. I did find it engaging as well. I think as athletes, as rugby players, we basically look for anything that can give us, 1 or 2%. And at that sort of level, the 1 and 2% do make a difference to the overall outcome. So, anything that can help aid my performance, I'm always interested in.
But it wasn't something that you were kind of having to do lots of work on. Was this mainly handled by the staff?
Yeah. We as players, we didn't have to do too much. Our only thing was to fill out the form, which probably took about 2 to 5 minutes every morning, which it wasn't onerous on the players at all.
Which, Alex, that's a good sign, right? Because if it's something that becomes a bit of a chore, then the players are going to be less engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is that it should be a nice, easy process. Most of the time that Maro's talking about actually wasn't interacting with Player.Connect. It was doing the 3 monitoring tests that the players did, taking their weight, doing some flexibility tests, and then inputting that data is all relatively straightforward. But it does give a really good picture of the players, how they're coping. And like Maro, some players are more interested than others. That's the only time that they would interact with it. Others might sit with a sports scientist, want to look at their own data, want to see, how far they're running, how, they probably are going to ask how they're comparing to other people, which they're very unlikely to be told. But the idea of understanding your own data and understanding what you can do to improve is really key. And the more data that's available, the more insight that's available, means that the players can do more to help themselves to get a chance at getting selected.
This is hugely exciting, right, Danny? Because there are so many possibilities for Player.Connect to provide benefits, not only for other sports, but in other industry sectors as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's completely transferable, Gabby. We can take that the principles of what we talked about, aggregating the data from siloed information streams, and delivering that up in a way that can serve an outcome. So Maro talked about it's a game of inches in sport. It's about getting that 1% benefit. So that was the outcome we were trying to deliver into the Lions team. But actually, we can take IoT and work on problem statements in every industry and work our way back. In fact, just recently there was an article by a journalist in the water industry, so in the utilities space, talking about how the technology that Vodafone is developing around smart water, which is doing something very similar, capturing data for leakages or meters or whatever it may be, and aggregating that together and presenting that back into the water industry, and doing so in a way that's quite unique. It's quite similar to what we've done for the Lions team on tour. So it's to take the same technology and apply the same principles to pipes under the ground versus players on the field. It's hard to get your head around that there's some alignment there, but there absolutely is. Even if we look at healthcare, for example, one of the big challenges that we faced during the pandemic, Gabby, was getting doctors into care homes to monitor patients. Well, what if we take this very same technology and simply create the connected care home, and use connectivity for good? So there's lots of industries where we can just simply do a lift and shift of this technology and drop it in, whether that's a utility, in healthcare, a care home, in transport, it doesn't really matter. It's the same concept of aggregation of data points, presenting that in a single pane of glass, and then taking actions based on that. And there's always a requirement for that.
Yeah, and I guess it's something that you need buy-in for. Maro, did everybody go for it in Jersey when Alex was there kind of explaining it and setting it all up? Or were some players who are a little bit more cynical than others?
I think, as Alex alluded to previously, I think players there's a varying degree of how much interest there is in this type of thing. Some players just prefer to, just focus on, the bare necessities and leave everything else to chance or to the wind. Or some players like to go overboard and look at every little piece of detail and look at every little thing of how they can improve and probably worry about it too much. I probably sit somewhere in the middle where I like to, receive the information. I like to know the reason why, but I also don't want it to like overburden me and overthink it sometimes.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm sure Alex doesn't want either, because it is about there is still an element of creativity in sport, isn't there? And that is also so important, isn't it? That not everything can be down, selection cannot be down to completely the metrics there. So there are some things that perhaps you're just a moment of genius that you can't quite quantify. That is the kind of formal bit, if you like. We're going to open it up to the floor now. And that's the end of our British and Irish Lions Vodafone Business Summit, the last of the three. But we have the floor now who are going to add their own spice to these questions. And this one is #Maro. How much does the 2021 Test Series result motivate you to ensure that you're in place to be included on the 2025 tour?
As I said previously, playing for the Lions is one of the biggest honors of my career. And, I want to have a career that is consistently at the top of the game, consistently competing for honors, consistently winning things. And, the outcome didn't go our way this tour just gone. But it just adds more fuel to the fire to be included in future tours, to be included in future high level competitions, and hopefully winning them. So the short answer is yes, it adds a lot of fuel to the fire. I wanna be playing rugby for a little while longer and be at the top of the game for a little while longer. And
maybe captain the 2025 tour?
Well, we'll leave that one to God.
#Danny, can you give us an idea how Player.Connect can be used in other sports? Or you've already talked about other sectors. Which sports are showing an interest, Danny?
Yeah, it's not just team sports. We've had some interest, actually, believe it or not, from tennis, from cyclists. So we're already piquing interest in a lot of elite sports. I can see this filter quite through into every sport. Really, there's some way in which we can apply these same principles to generate that 1%. As I said, it's a game of inches in sport, especially elite sports. Can we create that 1% difference in any sport? And with Alex's help, we'll go out there and we can do that in the market.
Yeah, and in terms of individual sports as well, Olympic sports, are those conversations, do they happen with the sports bodies? Do they happen with the British Olympic Association? How does it work? Do they approach you, or is this something that you can see Vodafone kind of being the market leader in?
Yeah, we have been approached by the British Olympics in terms of understanding what we can do in this space, and I suppose that there's lots of exploratory conversations around how this can be applied to both team and individual sports. I think actually one of the areas that we're interested to work with is Alex mentioned Catapult earlier, so there's other device manufacturers already capturing data, so it's about how we complement them in terms of turning that data into a much more usable mechanism for all of these elite sports. So I think that will find different doors and open different doors for us to go in and engage with different sports teams.
Alex, this one's for you. Are teams using the data to manage the players during the games yet? Is it possible for a player to be substituted because their data is showing they're not performing at their optimum level? And I guess the important thing about this is the data could therefore indicate that the potential increase for injury or the propensity for injury if a player for some reason is performing below the standards that they're used to seeing in training.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that some of that data is available in real time, and it is available already. In some teams are using that in real time to analyze whether or not they think a player is performing, whether their level of fatigue is high, and that can certainly lead to some insights about whether or not a player is more or less likely to become injured. There's also data around head injuries and collisions, and all of that. When you bring all of that together, you get a much more holistic view of how that individual is coping. Now, if they're not coping very well, then the propensity for injury increases, and there's quite a lot of good science coming out that gives pointers as to when an injury might happen and help you make those decisions. So the short answer is yes.
But there's still a room for coaches, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it still comes down to, to give you a slightly different example. So, as well as working in elite sport, I've also worked with some of the elite military and working with the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs take a different approach, which is their view is, if the individual says they are fit enough to go into battle, no one asks them a question, because if they say they're fit, that member of the team is more valuable to them in battle than they are at home with their feet up. Now, in sport, it's not exactly the same, but the players, if the players are fit enough, saying they're fit enough to compete, then often, if they're the best person in that position, then that has to be honored, and that's down to the coach to make a decision whether they think that they can compete. But the best player, is the tired best player better than the second best player? That's down to the coach to make that decision.
While we're talking about injuries, Maro, can I just ask you, because we haven't talked in detail about the way each test panned out, but how surprised were you after what happened in the 1888 Cup with Alan Wynne to see him coming back, storming back into camp and getting rid of that injury and playing after what looked like something that was going to keep him out for months?
Yeah, it was very surprising. When it initially happened, he didn't look too optimistic about it. I remember speaking to him in the changing room, and he was pretty much saying that he thinks his tour is over. But Alan Wynne being Alan Wynne, he went back to the drawing board and rehabbed the life out of his shoulder, and he came back as good as new. So yes, it was a remarkable recovery.
Yeah, and I guess in a way kind of personifies the Lions spirit, doesn't it? It must have been quite a boost for everyone just to see him come back, and it's always nice when kind of fresh blood arrives back into a camp when you've been together for a while.
Yeah, he came back. He came back full of energy, full of vim. He was keen to, try and positively influence the group. So, as players, we were very happy to receive him.
Yeah, absolutely. What is, Danny, Vodafone's role with Player.Connect in terms of the big challenges in developing and launching the tech? The biggest challenge for you, let's say.
In terms of, it's effectively already developed now, Gabby. So we build our IoT solutions on a case by case basis for every individual customer, because the outputs are never going to be the same. So this is not an off-the-shelf proposition. It's not something that we will standardize as a product and you can, log on and buy. Effectively, if we're talking to a sports team, and let's use sports, cyclists will have very different measurement requirements and outputs and KPIs that they'll want to look at and reflect upon. So actually, we will tailor. So I think what we could probably say is that 80% of the core coding is there in the platform already today. Of course, we've got the infrastructure and the architecture to do this quite easily. So a lot of the work has been done when we developed Player.Connect for the Lions team, but actually we'll take that last 20% and tailor that to every customer's requirements. Now that's true if it's in a sport or a city or a manufacturing plant or a hospital location that's trying to track assets. All of these things are pretty much the same. We've got the core code there. We'll always tailor and bespoke it. So this is not off the shelf. It is tailored to the customer's requirements.
And this question, I think, would be for Alex. Could Player.Connect ultimately be used to identify talent and nurture it?
Absolutely. So, talent ID is a really key aspect of elite sport now. And Player.Connect is perfectly positioned to be able to do that, collect data from a large number of individuals and then, find the outliers. And that's the whole purpose of Talent ID. So yeah, it definitely could be used for that and should be.
Yeah, a question for Maro, which kind of goes a little bit towards what we talked about earlier. Which tourists surprised you? You said the Scots surprised you overall in terms of how much you got on with them. But which player surprised you in a more positive way? Can I add to that? Is there any player who had a hidden talent that you weren't aware of?
Yes, the answer to that question is, with regards to hidden talent, is Robbie Henshaw. He is a brilliant musician. He's brilliant on the guitar. I think he's brilliant on the ukulele, I think it is as well. And he can hear a song and just play the tune off just hearing the note.
By ear.
So
Wow.
By ear, yeah, which was quite remarkable. And in a slightly less professional way, I think a few of the players surprised me how much they could drink. There was a lot of players who, towards the end of the tour, who were having a couple of beers, and they definitely surprised me how much alcohol a human being can consume.
Are you saying that you're a lightweight, Maro?
I am saying that. I am saying that, especially in comparison to them.
You're not going to give away any names. Any nations that were particularly...
Any nations? Well, it's probably, as you can expect, the Irish. They drank a lot. The Scottish drank a lot. And probably Wales and England were probably neck and neck. Behind them.
Well, that's probably, Danny, what we expected, is it?
No surprise. It was coming.
Can you tell us, this is for you, Alex, how does the accuracy of the data affect decision making? And were any players cautious about the decisions being negative towards them because of the data?
So I don't know the answer to the second part, but the accuracy of the data on the devices that the Lions use is very high, which was the reason for choosing it. Not only is the accuracy of the data high, but the consistency of the data is very good. So there's very little variability, and that means that you can have a lot of confidence in the data that you're seeing. Players, I'm sure that players are concerned about whether or not data is being used to make the decision, but ultimately the final decision lies with the coaches, not with the data scientists. So they'll be informed of that information, but ultimately it's going to come down to a subjective decision about who they think is most likely to be the best person for that position.
Okay. And Danny, can you give us an example, this question is for you, of how IoT solutions can help Vodafone business customers?
I think we kind of covered it across the hour, Gabby. I think if any customer has a particular challenge, IoT has a great many possibilities in terms of how we can solve those challenges around connecting assets, tracking assets, monitoring assets, whether that be, any type of industry at all. I think it's all about harnessing your data exhaust. Where do you have data points, and would it serve your business to have access to that data? And effectively, can we serve up a rich source of data that allows you to make inputs and decisions and insights around your business? If you ask yourself that question, the answer more than likely is going to be yes. So every business will have some form of challenge that they could face better if they have better information about their business, and that's exactly what IoT does. It can plug in, it can present, and it'll let you effectively take control of your business. So I think there's lots of opportunities, and a call, I suppose, to any business customers out there who today maybe have got exactly that problem. Reach out to your account team, to your account manager, reach out to me directly if you want. We can absolutely support and understand how can we use IoT to support your business goals.
I'm not sure if Maro, there he is, Maro's back. Maro, this question for you. After a challenging tour and last year with the pandemic, what are you most looking forward to about this season? I think I can guess.
Well, I think there's a lot of things to look forward to, but I think probably the most satisfying or most exciting thing will be just having full crowds back in the stadium. We've missed the fans, certainly. I think sometimes you can take the atmosphere, the noise, the joy that the fans bring to the game for granted, and the pandemic has just highlighted the importance of the fan and how crucial the fans are to create the spectacles that we all love.
Yeah, I think that was the answer I was expecting, and it'll be strange for you, actually, won't it? The first time that you run out, and I think it was in the Autumn Nations Cup last year. The final game against France had about 2,000 people at Twickenham, and it was so bizarre having had empty stadiums through the whole of that tournament. Suddenly, 2,000 people felt like an atmosphere, which is so bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, very bizarre.
Yeah, so it'll be wonderful seeing the packed stadiums again this season, both for the domestic and the international game. Guys, it's been really great learning about IoT, learning about Player.Connect and how it's aided and helped Maro and the rest of the Lions this summer, and where it can go, the possibilities going forwards for other sports as well as rugby. So thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your insights there. But we are now out of time. And Danny, I know you want to say a few more words, though, to the customers out there who are listening in. So I'll give you the floor.
Absolutely, Gabby. Thanks very much for that. I just want to thank all of our customers, Gabby, for tuning in today and listening, of course, to our ambassador, Maro, and Alex, who's been super key in terms of developing this application, Player.Connect, for us. If anyone has any of those industry challenges, Gabby, I think just please do reach out to your account teams, even to me directly. Let us understand how we can use this technology to support your business going forward. Thanks to the gentlemen for today. But Gabby, listen, you've hosted 3 of these sessions so far throughout the summer. They've all been brilliant. We've had fantastic feedback. So thanks so much for doing such a great job from everyone at Vodafone.
Oh, it's been great doing them. And let's hope maybe next time we can all be in the same room together. But guys, thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week. And thank you all for tuning in for these Vodafone Business Summits. And they're available to watch, the first 2, if you missed them, on the Vodafone Business YouTube channel. But for today, from me, that's just about it. Take care and goodbye.